Hi everyone. So I'm going to talk about Azure Event Grid. So the first thing I like to do is set a little bit of groundwork and do some semantics around messaging and service communication. And with that is, I like to introduce you a blog post by Clemens Vassar, who's part of the Azure Service Bus team, which is the product group that created this service and put it out now, which is in preview. And to set the stage a bit, that there are all kinds of types of messaging. So you can have bidirectional, you have direct messaging, and it could be through relay, and you can either have push and pull mechanisms. So there's quite a few services out there, and they're kind of complementary to each other instead of competing, and it's something he points out too. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, what the amount of messaging services in Azure are currently available. And you see them listed right here. So you have the notification hubs for you have logcaps where you could trigger a workflow with a message, and subsequently it communicates with other line of business systems or SaaS applications or Azure services. You have, of course, the service bus itself, which is kind of the Swiss Army knife within Azure for messaging. So you can do queues, you can topics, you can do bidirectional relay, which is listed a little bit further down, further up, or to the right. You can have, in IoT scenarios, have the event hubs for large stream ingestion, and you have something in complementary to, which is kind of the IoT hub that enables the connectivity and setup message management for you. And then you also see listed here the event grid, which is for event distribution. So you have kind of few services out there, and I kind of want to show you that it does have a place within the complete Azure ecosystem, and it has a certain purpose. And for that, you need to do some of the things around messaging and eventing. So with a message, there's clearly an intent. Could be a command, could be a transfer of value or data, a handover, an update, a request. So quite some stuff around what's intended with a message. Versus what you would have with an event, which is more kind of a fact, with a report, a notification, a measurement, or something like a trace. So that's kind of the distinction. So there's a notion with regards to messaging that with the message itself, you have intents, versus with event, that is kind of a fact. So looking at that, you have messaging on the left-hand side and eventing on the right-hand side. So that's here you see that clearly distinction about intents versus facts. So that's kind of the semantics you really have to grasp in reflection to some of the services. So with the intent, you have some type of expectation. It could be a conversation between services, exchanging information, could be contract value transfer. So those are kind of thing you really have messaging for. That's kind of with intent, and it's probably what you're fairly familiar with, especially if you're working in on-premise with Biz Observer, for instance. You deal with a lot of messaging instead of, for instance, eventing, which is more effect within Azure itself. And there you really have, with IoT scenarios, you have to deal with, sometimes with a context or history or something in an orderly time fashion, like time series data, where you could act upon, but you don't have to. So that's kind of the clear distinction between the two. So with messaging, there's clearly an intent, and there you communicate with other entities or services alike. While with eventing, you just, you send out an event, but it doesn't per se mean that it's intended for a certain entity. It broadcasts basically. While with messaging, you can have data exchange going back and forth, while with eventing, you kind of do not have that. And with events, there's this distinction about, discrete and series. So that's another semantic thing with regards to events. So discrete could be an independent event. It could be a state change of a report, something you can act upon. Versus time series, or a series where it could be time ordered. Let's say you do environmental control in a greenhouse. Greenhouses are very popular within in Holland. They grow all kinds of crops in there. Let's say the temperature raises at a certain point, or the moisture, so it gets more moist within a greenhouse, or you get more CO2 development. Those are kind of, if that trend starts to evolve in the data that's being emitted, that you could anomaly and you could do something about it. So serious data is more like you analyze it versus discrete, where you do more kind of do an action upon it. So with that kind of semantics out of the way, and you have a little bit of a sense of what's being meant by messaging, eventing, then you have Event Grid, which is kind of a central capability within Azure, central managed for your events. So basically you manage the events in one place. So that's what a service is. It's a platform as a service. And on one end, you have event publishers, which could be like a blob storage, resource groups. A few out there now, there are more coming. I'll mention it later on a bit, but this is like where events are being published within Azure, and then they can be routed, or they're like sent to what's called a topic within Event Grid, and then you have subscribers on that topic. You can also have custom events sent towards an Azure topic. So some of the capability of Event Grid is within these Azure services, while you can also create an Azure Event Grid topic where you can send custom events to. And then on one other hand, you can have multiple handlers for your events, so they can react on that. So basically, you manage it in one place. So within, for instance, a blob storage, you can create an event subscription for handlers. And you can do this in some of the other services listed here too. So you kind of subscribe to a certain event created in, let's say, blob. So let's say a blob is created, as you see here. And then you can have multiple event handlers based on a webhook mechanism, for instance, subscribe upon that event based on filters, which I will touch upon in a minute. So basically on filtering, there's kind of the intelligence in there. You can route them to certain event handlers. So you benefit currently, as it's still in preview, to some of the event publishers and event subscribers, which are available immediately now as we speak. So it's in preview, but the publisher and subscribers listed here are available for you right now. And as you're aware, since it's a preview, they're creating and building more publishers on one end and subscribers on the other hand in the future to come. So it's still in preview, it's still evolving. It's out there now for a few months, and they're developing really to create more publishers and subscribers to get a more versatile experience within Azure to create solutions. So basically the concept of Event Grid is that you have an event that happens. So that happens within a publisher. So take some, and then it gets emitted towards the Event Grid to a kind of topic. So all the publishers push their, and I emphasize push their events to an Event Grid topic, where you have subscribers subscribing on those events. And then the event subscription is kind of goes to a handler that kind of handles the event itself. So there's some guiding principles with regards to Event Grid. So it's always available, and that's kind of the traits you could see with platform as a services, that because it's managed by Microsoft, kind of they ensure that availability. They give you kind of a near real-time event delivery, and it's at least once. So for instance, with Logic Apps, you have at least once execution of a workflow, and this is an at least once delivery of your event. Since it's a platform as a service in Microsoft, that it also automatically means that you get dynamic scale. So it scales under the cover. So there's like a service fabric underneath it, so that enables the scaling of this service. It's platform agnostic in a way that you can subscribe to these events using a webhook mechanism, which is pretty universal. So it's not tied to Microsoft only. And it similar accounts for the wire, kind of its HTTP protocol, which is being used. So once an event is being sent out and it's being received, you get a 200 or 202 HTTP kind of response. And then this schema of an event, so the event within Event Grid has to adhere to a certain schema. So you see here and a kind of an example of it. So there needs to be a couple of fields in there. So mandatories like the topic, subject, event, time and type, and ID, and the data. So those are kind of the maritime fields, and with data you can kind of have that payload. And advanced in for kilobytes. So that's kind of the size limit of your event. And based on that, you can do subscriptions. So you can subscribe on the event type. For instance, a blob is being created. I have an example in the demo later on. And you can do filtering using a prefix and suffix. So you can either, for instance, in a blob creator, you can say, okay, I want to have all the JPEG files and they're in a certain container. So the certain container is in the prefix filter, and the suffix filter, you have the .jpeg file. But you can also, for instance, just subscribe to all the events if you like. And then you have this notion of webhooks. So because I already said it's like agnostic, platform agnostic. So kind of the webhooks is predominantly the way you subscribe to events. And once you subscribe towards the event, it kind of sends out an echo, or it kind of sends out application code you will have to echo upon. So basically identify yourself as, enable you, the fact that you are who you say you are. So that's why you have to respond back. I have an example of that too. So when you register, you kind of see these validation codes coming back. And there's a special case, for instance, with request bin, which is whitelisted so that you can do this, because this is kind of a mechanism to prevent DDoS attacks. If you look at security in general, with regards also to webhook, there's currently no header support in there, nor ways of doing it all off. So the way of securing it is by using it within a query string. So that's why you can have your SAS token or your key. So this is kind of how this validation echo looks like. So I have an example in the request bin later on as well. Kind of provide back ownership of the fact that you have this webhook set up. So it's kind of a validation event. This happens. That looks some of the other stuff, or at least traits or specifics around Event Grid. So what about performance? So it's got very low latency. It's got availability because this is all managed by Microsoft, and it's got this service fabric under the hood to give you this type of performance. You can have about 10 million events per second per region and 100 million subscription per region. So it's pretty scalable. It has transparent type of failover capability, and also retry mechanism using an exponential backoff mechanism. So the TTL of an event is 24 hours, and within the 24 hours, it kind of will do this exponential backoff. So do like 10 minutes, 30 minutes. Something is depicted here in an application inside Trace Stack, as you can see. So that's how it will work. And then, of course, you wonder, okay, what would the pricing be of the service? Currently, you get about per million operations, about 30 cents, and it will go up, of course, once it goes GA. And the operations are depicted here, what it includes, what an operation is, an ingress event, matching, delivery attempts, and so forth. So those all count as an operation. And you get the first 100,000 free. So it's kind of, pay-as-you-go model with regards to the pricing of this capability. Then let's look at some of the scenarios. Okay, so you talked me about some of the semantics of messaging, eventing. Okay, what is this capability, the service that Azure offers, but with regards to events, but how can I use it? So the way you could use this is, for instance, building serverless applications. So you can have event-driven business logic. So something happens within your container, let's say an image is being uploaded. Then you can have an event sent out to Event Grid, and then you can have one or multiple services react upon it. So it could be analyzing the image, which I got a demo for. It could be text sentiment analysis, could be a notification of an IoT device being disconnected, which is not available yet, but you can do something like that. You can have operations automation, so really you can improve DevOps workflow. You can do something like policy enforcements with regard to firewalls or scaling. Or for instance, you say, okay, within my subscription, I'm only allowing services to be provisioned within certain regions. Let's say you're only allowing your services and resource group, etc., being provisioned within, let's say, the European regions. So you don't want to have anything provisioned outside of it. So you can have a notification of that, or at least events subscribe on those events, and then you can act upon it by saying or automating the fact that the resource is going to be deleted, for instance. Interesting application integration scenarios where you could create all types of integration. You, for instance, using a logic app, synchronization of data and such, because you have this logic app that could, and a function, for instance, that could process data which are in the payload of an event. Okay, so let's look at a demo. Let's just look and see this capability in action. So let's say you have a receipt from you park your car. As a consultant, we kind of were able to expense some of our costs. Let's say I park my car because I'm going to an event and I want to expense this. So I could send the scan of the receipt through Microsoft Flow towards Azure Blob Storage, where I configured the event grid on the events of a blob created. That event is being pushed out to the topic, which has a subscriber, which is a function. And that function will, in the payload, see that the URL of the Azure Blob Storage JPEG file, and it will get that, download that data, and push that to Computer Vision API and do the optical character recognition capability available there. Process it and kind of gives back that data, and then the data is being pushed, at least the outcome of your OCR response is being pushed out to the service bus, and then subsequently you can continue processing that data to ultimately pay out someone directly through his bank account, or let's say the amount is too high, then you can act further on. This could be a part of an overall solution. So let me switch over to Flow. So what I'll do here is that you can have Flow on your devices as well. So you have a scan of your receipt. You run the flow, and it's done. Then I'll switch over to the Azure Storage Explorer, and here you can see that parking receipt right there, 30 minutes time past 1. So now it's within the blob storage. And let me just give you a look inside the storage. So here you see that subscription of the image analysis function. So when you create a function, you get an endpoint you can put right in here. In a prefix filter, you kind of put the details on what kind of container that blob is resided, where it's pushed into, and then here you see the suffix field. So this is kind of the routing that I've put into. And I have another subscription here set up, and that's just request bin, which is what I said, whitelisted, and it just gives me every event. So let me just give you a sense of this. You see the put blob right here, so that's what, so it's being created. Here you see the time, and here you see the mandatory fields and the payload itself. Now let me scroll down a bit and also tell you a little bit about this validation code is echoing back, which you can see here. So once you set up request bin and set that subscription within your event grid topic, you get this type of messaging as well, or at least the validation code being sent back. So that's the part. Okay, so let's go to the function. So it's being pushed to the topic, to the event grid topic, and here the message being picked up by a function. As you can see, the URL is being pulled out of the event and is being pushed to the analyzed image, which will send that the stream of the image towards that cognitive service, and then the response is being sent back to the function, and which subsequently is put into the service bus. So with functions, you can have multiple in and outputs. So here I've created, there's one input, which is the events coming in, and there's an output in a way that is going to give a 200 back to the event grid topic, as in I've received the message, and then the other output is that it will put this out to the service bus. So here I have the Service Bus Explorer, just to give you a sense of the, and here it is, 1418. Let's look at the details. So this is kind of what's being outputted by the OCR capability in the Vision API. Just to give you a sense how that behavior looks like, let's just switch back to, and here you can see, so if you just go to computer vision, you can test it yourself. And here I already done it, because if you submit it or you browse and then you go to your file, then you kind of have to provide a code as well. Otherwise you can have DDoS type of attacks. But here I just already done this, or once you can do it yourself as well if you want with certain images. So it does the text analysis. So this is just the text itself, but also here you can see that JSON. So this is kind of the response that's being given back by the OCR capability. So this is part of an overall solution could look like. So this is kind of what I wanted to kind of demonstrate a little bit, where you can find Event Grid in a part of an overall type of solution, which is not uncommon. Is now you see insurance companies say, okay, if you got something on your car, something's damaged, you can create a picture of it and send it and upload it. So these type of solutions are already out there, but you can leverage, let's say, Azure to do some analysis, etc. with it. For instance, using Event Grid, which is here a central part of it. So in summary, just to summarize Event Grid. So the service is still in preview. And as I already told earlier in this webinar, there are more subscribers and handler comments. So you have the ability to create your own custom events, which you have to adhere to the schema, which I showed you in the webinar as well. But there will be more subscriber handling coming within Azure to create more solutions, something like I showed you already. There will be some management put in there as well. So currently, the only actual thing you can do is set up the topic within Azure and do the subscription and stuff, but the management is still not available, but that will come. And also the enhancement in the security. So I talked a little bit about the limitations there currently are with securing, for instance, a webhook. In general, I think this service is pretty easy to understand. There's some good resources out there, and also Microsoft has some walkthroughs, so it's easy to understand. And I think with, for instance, the blog that Clemens Vest has put out, you really see the position within the Azure messaging landscape. And it's, as you also can see in the demo, where I used Event Grid and Service Bus, for instance, that is, and functions, that is really like not competing with each other, it's just complementing each other, based on the fact you use Event Grid. And the concept in general, this capability is all about push-push. So an event's being pushed to the Event Grid, which pushes it to anyone subscribing to certain events. And then the other thing, and this is not like to sell this, or this is just like currently within the complete cloud provider landscape, it's unique, it's in kind. So there's no competing service on any other cloud provider. Let's say on Amazon or Google, not to say that they might develop something similar or put something similar out, but a central management capability of your events is currently not available in any of the other cloud providers' platforms. If you want to learn more, especially because what I said is easy to understand, you can, for instance, explore the Event Grid blog by Tom, my fellow colleague and Azure MVP, who have written some blogs around the Event Grid and some aspects like security, some other scenarios as well. There's a Microsoft blog which introduced the Event Grid, where you subsequently can find other resources. And there's some people in the community that blogged around it, like Eldad Godeboer, who yesterday did one for Integration Monday, talked about Event Grid. I talked about it through Middleware Friday and put some blogs out as well, also around custom events. Daniel Toomey, and also a consultant from FIDEX, who created also some blogs around Event Grid. So although it's still early days, there's quite some resources out there explaining how this capability and service works. And for that, I kind of like to thank you for tuning in this afternoon to listen to this short webinar around how Event Grid can help you in building a different type of solution.